Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. I'll never forget hearing President Roosevelt say, "Yesterday was a date that which will live in infamy," and ask the Congress to declare that a state of war exists. We've had wars since, but we've never had a declaration of war from the Congress. Why haven't we, and what does that mean? I don't know anyone better than Mario Cuomo to ask that question of. And this is the first part of a two-part conversation with the governor. And I'm very glad you're here. And so, Governor, why haven't we had a declaration of war?
I think, I hope this isn't simplistic, but because eager presidents and timid Congresses came together to basically subvert the Constitution and to ignore it and to allow the president to act as though he, or it's always been he, is the proper party to declare war. The United States of America, I think, has many strengths. One of them is not understanding its own Constitution. We don't learn enough about it in school, and the people forget the little that they did learn. If the whole population knew that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution has from the very beginning made one very clear statement. In effect, it says, we don't want the president to have the ability to declare war. That must go to Congress. Why? Well, it was common sense and experience. And the person with the most common sense and experience was Washington. And in the conferences before they wrote the Constitution, when they got to the war power question, everybody agreed with Washington that you shouldn't leave it to the president. One vote against him, just one vote against him. And what was his logic? The logic is, this is the most important thing a country can do, decide to start killing people and to have its own people killed in a war. It shouldn't be done by one person, because it's whoever the person is. It's too possible, if not probable, that that person might have a bad day, might be less than brilliant, might be misinformed, might be overly ambitious. They had the king as a recollection. They had an experience with monarchies and kings who could declare war by snapping their fingers. And Washington said, that's the last thing you want. So let's use the Congress. Why the Congress? The Congress is big. The Congress deals with the whole country. The Congress is many minds. The Congress is most of the political opinions in the country represented. The Congress is less likely to make a mistake. Bottom line, the wars up until the Second World War were declared by Congress, and they worked out fairly well, particularly the First and Second World War. Second World War, you referred to already. What happened when presidents decided to do it? Vietnam.
Nothing.
Korea. Right. Nothing. Worse than nothing. Bad wars. Right. Unintelligent wars.
I meant nothing from Congress.
Right. False wars by the president. Iraq. Have you ever had a better example of the intelligence of the founding fathers than President Bush's mistake? Mistake is being kind. Mistake in going to war in Iraq and misjudging everything, whether we needed to, whether there was a relationship with Al-Qaeda, how many people you needed to fight it, how you'd be received, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He made every mistake you could make. That's exactly what Washington said was the problem.
Is it fair to say he made the mistake? I always thought it was deliberate on his part. When he used that evidence, and when Colin Powell used they were deliberately looking for a reason to justify his doing it and going further than the UN. So the mistake has really been historically the Congresses.
Well, let me say two things.
They don't do anything about that.
Well, let me say two things. First of all, there's another implication in what you said is, was he lying?
Right.
Now, God knows whether he was lying. You don't know, I don't know. We may have our suspicions. I certainly have mine. But I'm going to erase my suspicion and give him the benefit of the doubt. And so he was just misinformed. Okay. But as to the role of Congress, you're absolutely right that Congress is at fault. Why? They know they have the power. And what they tried to do was to delegate the power to the president. Because if you look at the resolutions they signed, which were a lot of mishmash, frankly, and as a lawyer I can tell you that Most of the important thing in the resolution was in the preamble, and preambles are not law. So they were very cute about what they did. But what they essentially did was to say, not it's we declare war, now let the president declare war too. What they said is, we're not going to declare war. We don't want the responsibility of declaring war. We don't care what the founding fathers said. We are delegating the president to take a look at the situation and see if he thinks we should go to war. Well, in delegating it to the president, you did exactly what the Constitution says you should not do, and what Washington very properly pointed out you should not do. What should they do right now? The Democrats, frankly, and the Republicans? Instead of saying what they hinted they were going to say, and I did an op-ed on this a few weeks ago in the New York Times, they said we're going to pass a statute that says if you want to go to war against Iran, oh my God, I forgot, you might do the same thing in Iran that you did in Iraq.
Because we just passed a resolution.
Well, but the Democrats are saying we want to pass a bill that says, oh no, if you're going to go to hell, if you're going to drop a bomb on the head of the Iranians, you must come to Congress. And I said this, bravo for pointing out that they must come to Congress, but shame on you for saying you want to pass a bill. Because if you pass a bill, that says in effect that the Constitution doesn't already order it. You don't need a bill. You have the Constitution. What you don't want to do is admit that you gave away that power as Congress to make the decision. So what you should do now is look at the people of the United States and say, look, we apologize. We should never have done what we did in 2002 and what we allowed in 2003 when this war was started by the president. We shouldn't have done it. We shouldn't have passed those resolutions. It was wrong. Here, finally, people say practically when you raise this argument, and I know because I've raised it since January and been rebuffed by one intelligent Democrat, many intelligent Republicans, they all say the same things. Well, Mario or governor or whatever, come on, since the Second World War, nobody has done it right. And I said, listen, you cannot amend the Constitution by persistent evasion. And do you think this country would have voted for a law that says, no, we don't want our Congress people to do it. We want one person, whoever that president happens to be, even if he happens to be an idiot, he should have the power.
This president disregards the Constitution in other ways. I mean, it doesn't even matter if they pass a law, because he then writes a signing statement which says, you passed a law, but I don't agree with it, so I'm not going to enforce it.
In effect, you're right. In effect, you've made it just a teeny bit simpler than it is, but you are essentially absolutely correct. Now, every president, or most presidents, have written signing statements. The signing statement is exactly as you point out. The law is passed by the Congress. That means both houses vote for it. It goes to the president, and the president vetoes it, and then a 2/3 vote sends it back to the president, and now it's before the president. And instead of just signing the bill that says, okay, all children up to 19 years of age get free health care, instead of saying that, he signs a bill with an additional statement that says, but I want all my agencies to know, in all the affected departments, that it's not so clear that you should rush to give the money, and maybe, and so he dilutes it. Instead of just signing and leaving it as law, he affects it mostly by diluting it in most cases. Now, is that constitutional? No. And as a matter of fact, it was pointed out by the Boston Globe, I think, in a wonderful series that won the Pulitzer Prize.
That's great, right.
And has anything been done about it? No. But look, here's what happens. Your president says what? I want to have as much power as possible. Why? Because the presidents feel that way for the most part. They get in office, they know the responsibility. Some of them are egotistical enough to want as much power as they can get, no matter how they get it. Some are with goodwill, feel
but some are driven with an ideology that is not necessarily the general acceptable ideology.
What those good presidents should do, men or women, and maybe we'll have a first woman this time, is answer this question. Am I smarter than the Constitution? Am I bigger than the Constitution? Should I overrule the Constitution in effect? or should I use the Constitution? And if you wanted evidence of what works best, just look back. And what happened, as I pointed out earlier, what happened when you ignored the Constitution and let presidents do it on their own? Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, 3 travesties. What happened when presidents did it? Second World War, First World War. Which do you think were better handled? And the argument's over.
I'm letting you talk a lot because I have a cough.
Now you talk.
Now, a signing statement is like the McCain Amendment. That's the McCain Amendment with torture, right?
Yes.
The president wrote a statement, and I'm sounding like Tim Russert now, and I don't
Please.
usually do this, but I'm doing it. The executive branch shall construe the torture provision in a manner consistent with the constitutional authority of the president to supervise the unitary executive branch and as commander-in-chief and consistent with the constitutional limitations on the judiciary. But he's going to construe it.
Yeah.
He's not going to follow it.
Yeah.
So he didn't follow it.
Yeah.
But that's very dangerous. I don't think this country doesn't allow a president
robbery
to decide that they're above the Constitution. And the Constitution has a provision in there, which is impeachment. So why hasn't that started? This is a very dangerous president. And I think he's extended all of these revisions and enlarged the presidency so it's no longer a balance of power. I mean, he is ignoring a balance of power. Why isn't it smart to move for an impeachment, at least in the House, to start the impeachment proceedings?
Well,
I mean, don't they have to make a statement, this is not acceptable?
you can do that without impeachment. You could do it as I suggested before. Nancy Pelosi could step forward with Harry Reid and say, we're the leaders of both houses, and we simply want to make clear 2 things. Number 1, we were wrong, and so were the Republicans. In 2002, and all the other times, when President Clinton dropped bombs, when anybody committed an act of war, and we, the Congress, sat back and didn't say anything, instead of immediately suggesting when the question came up, and you always have some indication that it might happen. This notion that, well, I had to act right away, and so I didn't have time, is silly.
Right.
And what they should say to the American people is, look, let's get this clear. Because we've fudged it up for years, the Congress. This is our responsibility now because we're in command. Here's what it says. It says the Congress must do those things, not the president. And the allocation of powers between the Congress and the president are clear in the Constitution. And if you American people want to change it, if you think it's better the way we have been doing it illicitly since the Second World War, then you're going to have to follow the war. Why? The law is everything in this democracy. Once you start tampering with that law, any big part of it particularly, and the war power is maybe the most important part of it, then you're playing with the First Amendment. Then you're playing with your right of free speech and your right to free religion or no religion if you choose.
So
all those basic rights.
Why do you think they haven't done it?
Because politically they're afraid of making the admission. They don't want to say we were wrong. But they were wrong.
But everybody knows they were wrong.
No, they do not.
Aren't they afraid also that something might happen and then it will be their fault?
No.
I mean, that there may be another attack in this country or something, and then they will be looked upon as being...
What? No.
I don't know.
No, they're not
I can't think of any reason why they haven't done this.
By confessing that you should have done it differently in declaring war, etc., and insisting on the right to do it yourself, you're not saying anything that makes us vulnerable, just the opposite. If the Congress had declared war or chosen not to, which might have happened, if after they studied it, etc., they might have said, we don't see the proof, etc. But that at least now alerts the whole Congress to what the situation is. They all have to study it. They all have to read the intelligence reports. They all have to make themselves knowledgeable because they're the ones who would be responsible and not the president. The president was responsible, but he could have done it entirely by himself without any advice. But he limited the advice to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people around him, and they were all wrong except for Colin Powell, and he didn't tell us the truth.
But the signing statements are also very important. We have now a discussion about torture and with the appointment of the new Attorney General.
Right.
And that, saying that about we were wrong about the war isn't really enough to say we don't tolerate these things. We pass laws. We want them
Bring a lawsuit.
administered.
Bring a lawsuit.
They should. That's right. I would like to bring a lawsuit. Can I bring it?
citizens in some cases have standing, in some cases do not. Let me give you another tragic problem with regard to the Constitution. Now, the problem, Ronnie, is we don't know the Constitution. Right. We're busy. I mean, we have 300 million people. Take the children out, take the people who are too old to function well out, take the group that's left. They're working for the most part, and they're not wealthy. Maybe 1% are wealthy enough so that they don't have to worry about anything, you know, and they can read all they want and read the Times and read magazines and make themselves aware. What about, and then there are the poor. And the poor are fighting, if they're not homeless and they're just barely holding on, they're fighting for survival. Then there's the group in the middle that's sliding down, the middle class, because the value of, the cost of everything they need most is growing faster than their wages. So this is a distracted American people. They don't read the Constitution. They don't understand signing statements. I guarantee you, if you did a poll tomorrow, and say, what are constitutional or unconstitutional signing statements by a president? Nobody would know what you're talking about.
Do you think the members of Congress totally understand what's happening?
No, or they'd be talking about it. So one of the first problems is awareness of this. And that's why it seems to me incumbent upon especially the Democratic leaders to come to the American people and explain it to them. Because one Sunday morning, and they could get this subject in every newspaper in the country. One Sunday morning, saying we're going to go to every show that'll put us on, and we're going to talk about two things: constitutional power. Number one, to declare war. Number two, the powers of the president, which this president is trying to accrete by diluting the Congress. And signing statements will be part of that, and a lot of other things. Mukasey's testimony, incidentally. I mean, when Mukasey said, in effect, well, waterboarding. They said waterboarding. You know, where you pretend that you make this guy think he's drowning, and you torture him that way, in quotes. Is that illegal torture? And he says, well, if it is, it's wrong. And he said, no. But is it? And he said, well, if it is, it's wrong.
And then he said he doesn't really know what it is, right?
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. And so what you should come in is demonstrate what it is, you know, with a dummy, and put it in a tank of water, and then say to him, what about that? Is that torture? So Mukasey is saying this, in effect, and so is Professor Yoo, who is very much in the minority, What he's saying, in effect, what they're saying is, all the power the president can glom in when you're at war, that the founding fathers intended him to have.
Right.
Really?
Under the protection. What is it?
Where did you say that? How do you? Yeah. I'll give you 3 books that say that's all wrong. I'll give you 13 books that say that's all wrong. But the public doesn't know this. Look, I wrote an op-ed piece first in January. I did 3 or 4, USA Today. I tried peddling them, in which I said, this war in Iraq is illegal. Nobody used it. And they all called and said the same thing. Governor, we're not doubting you on the law. But, you know, where does this go? You're saying the war in Iraq is illegal. How does that get the people back? You know, and so we can't make it a real story. One thing changed that. One op-ed in the New York Times, when all of a sudden Iran became a possibility. See, now instead of saying just, this is an illegal war in Iraq, you were able to say, and he might do it again in Iran. And that, boom.
But then the Congress went ahead and passed a resolution. What did they say in that resolution in Iran?
Well, now Hillary Clinton and others are trying to explain what they said there. They, in effect, I think in fairness, that resolution said that certain troops that were Iranian are terrorist in nature. And that means that they can be treated the way you treat terrorists. That does not mean you can start a war against Iran.
Well, but it's not explicit, so he can say they're part of Al-Qaeda, and he goes ahead and does it. Why would anybody vote for that?
What people objected to was that the implication that maybe that could be misunderstood and taken to be. And I think the way you deal with that is take the 75 people who voted for that bill and say to each of them specifically, what was your intent when it comes to war against Iran? How do you feel about that? And then they would all say what Hillary Clinton has said. You have to go to the Congress first. And then what you should do is not stop. You should say, next question, why do we have to go to the Congress? And they'd have to say, because of the Constitution. And then you'd say, why didn't you do that with the war in Iraq? And that's when the truth would come out.
Well, then they can say, we made a mistake. Exactly.
That's what should be done.
But you haven't convinced me that they shouldn't begin an impeachment proceedings.
No, I didn't try to.
Right. I mean, that's the people's protection in the Constitution.
Here's what you can do with impeachment. Yeah. One way to start the impeachment is to get a prosecutor, a special prosecutor, and put the question specifically to the prosecutor.
In the House. This is all in the House.
Right. And what I would start with is this question. When the president went to war and said it was because of weapons of mass destruction, was he lying or was he simply deceived? And let us know. Prosecutor answer that question. If the prosecutor answered the question by saying he was deceived, then okay, he was a dummy, we regret it, nobody's perfect, let's move on. If he was lying, then the game is over, and then he's gone and he's disgraced and you move on to a better America. But yes, that would be a good idea.
We've also talked about the third branch, which is the judiciary, and the fact that they have a cover. I think, what do you call it? The political, what is that?
The political question.
Yeah.
All right. This is another one of the things that's going to be in my article. Here's how the political question works. Well, first of all, you have the Constitution, and the Constitution is very clear. You have the branches, or you have the president. We know what he does. You have the Congress. They make the laws, and then you have the Supreme Court, which is not political. Political means you have to vote for them. That's the president. Right. That's the Congress. The Supreme Court is appointed by the president with the vote of the Senate, but they're not elected, and they're there for life. They're there through senility. It's wonderful. I mean, a terrific job. You don't even have to buy pants, because you.
But you didn't want it.
No, I didn't want it. Anyway,
we won't get into that today.
So, what is their mission? Their mission is to take the actions of the Congress and other actions and make sure that they comply with the Constitution and other federal laws, but basically the Constitution. And what do? They get to the war power questions, in which, let's take Vietnam. A lawsuit is started in federal court, Brooklyn. Judge Judd, J-U-D-D, says this is an illegal war in Vietnam. You did not go to Congress, Article 1, Section 8. Absolutely illegal. Judge Douglas, Justice Douglas in the Supreme Court, says he's absolutely right down there in Brooklyn in this federal court system, and we should put a stay right away of no money, no more war, stop until we decide this question, because they didn't go to the Congress for a declaration of war. And then a cadre of other justices in the Supreme Court took over and said, look, this is too hot to handle, in effect. This is a political question. What is that? Well, it involves the political branches, the president and the Congress. So what? Well, in a political question, we shouldn't get involved. Where does it say that? I mean, you're the experts on the Constitution. Where does it say that in the Constitution? Well, it doesn't. It's a matter of balancing. You mean on the most important question you could be faced with? Should we begin the process of killing human beings and being killed, our own human beings? You're not available to tell us whether that's constitutional. And they say, that's right. We don't handle those questions. It's called the political question doctrine. That question has come up again recently in connection with Iraq. And a court neighboring us in Massachusetts, a federal court that reviewed the Iraq situation and set it all out, concluded they wouldn't deal with it either. But on the question of political question as a device, they said it's murky and difficult to understand. That's judges saying about the Supreme Court. Another point there. Remember Bush against Gore? Do you remember what that was about? Do you remember
how forget?
You want a political issue?
Right.
How about were the ballots right? What could be more political than that? What did the Supreme Court do? Did they say it's a political question and we're not going to? No. They said, let's grab this case and make Bush president. And so 5 conservatives voted that Bush should be president. And when you ask them, Nino Scalia, who's in some ways a very, very attractive guy, super smart, super nice, incidentally, I've met him, but his rulings are something else. He was asked about, said, hey, but you're so smart. I mean, how do you justify that? And in other cases, say it's a political question, he says, get over it. That was his answer. Get over it.
If there was legislation in the Congress to repeal the Wade v. Roe, it wouldn't be there. How would they repeal? It's Roe v. Wade. So, how would the Supreme Court ever say it was a political question? Could they ever address it that way?
No, they're dying to get it. The conservatives are dying to get it, and so are the others. The people who believe in Roe against Wade.
But wouldn't it be considered a political question? Wouldn't any question that has a divisive response?
Yeah, theoretically, because there's no definition of political question. Right. I mean, they made it up.
They made it up. It's not in the Constitution at all.
And they said, well, look, there were a lot of things it didn't apply to. Brown against the Board of Education. Right. You know, there was a fight. Congress would never have passed an integration bill. Only the Supreme Court forced them to do it. And the president, in some cases, did want an integration bill. So there's a struggle. No, look, it's a game. It's a terrible game. Well, why hasn't something been done? Because we don't know. And it's not our fault. It's not the fault of the American people. It's not the fault of my parents, you know, had a grocery store and couldn't read or write. You know, it's not their fault. It's not the fault of all the working people, all the school teachers. They don't have the time to study this. This is what the press is supposed to do for you, but most of all, it's what your political leaders should do for you.
You're going to come back next week, and we're going to talk about the Fourth Estate, which was supposed to oversee these three branches of government, right? Thank you, Governor Cuomo, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.